Hey, I'm Tony, and this is Tony Talks Tabletop. I'll just try and give you a brief synopsis and overview of my history with TTRPGing. I was introduced to D&D, AD&D in 1997, so that was 25 plus years ago. And I didn't become a DM until 2014 or 2015, so a little over 10 years ago. But there was a lot of stuff in between. Ow, June, you tracking my feet, you little punk? Yeah, so I was introduced in 1997. I was 4 years old, and it was AD&D. I was introduced to the game by my mom's friends, who who just so happened to be her weed dealers. And they had a whole D&D room that was they had all this terrain and minis and everything. So as a kid, as a 4-year-old kid being shown that was a really good way to engage with the game, and I just immediately got hooked. And so every time I went over there, I wanted to stay because, having a whole room of terrain was awesome. We ended up, moving, and after a few years I got into Pokemon cards, and then a few years later Yu-Gi-Oh cards. I was trying to recapture that feeling of playing an RPG game, but not really knowing how to put that together, and not, I played board games my whole life growing up because my family, they've always played board games, but D&D was a different itch to scratch. So I was trying to figure that out, trying to make up games. I was trying to make up my own card games with a progression system. I tried to make up my own miniatures games, and eventually I found this game called Heroescape, and I loved the just random range of minis that were in that game. And the terrain is really cool because it's these hex tiles that you can click together to make terrain, and they had water tiles and all this stuff. So I used to just making continents and planning campaigns out and stuff. I made a whole game with this chalkboard in my garage that tracked campaigns and weather, and it was way too in depth. I was only I want to say 12 years old, but I had a lot of fun. So of course, naturally, the next step is wargaming. So, I found a hobby shop and I saw the minis, and I got into Warhammer 40K and Warhammer Fantasy, and just got super into painting the minis and making terrain. And unfortunately, I don't have most of my minis in terrain from back then. In fact, I think I only have one piece of terrain from back then, and any terrain that I do have is in another state. I moved recently and decided to leave all that stuff back there for now. I'm working on getting all my physical stuff here so that I can have stuff here to play D&D, because I've really been, TTRPGs rather. So yeah, I found a hobby store, got into painting minis, and that was the thing that I was obsessed with for a while, was painting minis. I got super intricate on the details. Unfortunately, I did end up moving, and I moved to Vegas, which was not a good place for a kid to be running around trying to make friends. After I moved there, I ended up finding the Neopets forums and doing just freeform RPing on there for a while. D&D, in my opinion, is I need rules. I'm not a fan of regular RP. Then some time later, I ended up making some friends who got me back into Yu-Gi-Oh, and then got me into Magic, because I was only I had some Magic cards as a kid, but I never knew how to play. One of my friends, Brett, he played when we were younger, and he had me play with him a couple times, but I had no idea what I was doing. I was just okay, I tap land and I do a thing. Okay, what next? He's now you untap. Oh, okay. So I had no idea. I had no idea why or anything. The rhythm of the game just wasn't clicking for me for some reason. I mean, now I wouldn't say I love Magic. I was about to say I love Magic. That's not true at all. I loved Magic at one point, and I grew out of love with Magic. I still like it. I have Commander. I have plans to build some historic decks just to have at the house, just so that like if people come over and they want to play Magic, bust out some like tribal decks or some, a burn deck or whatever, and just, go at it. I met some people who were into card games, so I got heavily into that, and I ended up moving a few times, making it difficult to play like Magic or Yu-Gi-Oh consistently with any of my friends. I ended up taking a break for it was probably only like a couple of years while I graduated high school and got a job, then moved to Oregon. And once I was there, then I started playing more games in general, card games, and tried to get into D&D sometime later. It took a while, but what ended up happening was I bought the D&D starter set, so I wanted to play it for a while, and as often happens with, I'm sure, many of the people who've tried playing D&D, is you get like super into the game, like the idea of the game, or you have played it before, and so you want to make a group, and you buy the stuff, and you like try and tell your friends what it is, and they're like, it's role playing, and you roll dice, and you do I don't know, man. That doesn't sound fun. And so it took a while, but one of my friends, David, decided that he wanted to play it. I'm not sure if I had been asking him very much. I think I mentioned it to him a few times, and I just went over to his house with the starter set and ran it with him and his brother-in-law. We had some fun. It was a terrible game, but it was still fun. As I'm sure most people, their first time DMing, it's absolutely horrendous. You get a lot of stuff wrong, but you know what? That's how you start. That was like 2014 or 2015 when I first DM'd for my friends, and then since then I've pretty much been a forever DM, of course, as it goes. If you're the first one that picks it up, you're stuck with it, I've made a lot of friends from it, and I've introduced some of my friends and family members to D&D, and that has caused some of them to grow entire friend groups, which is nice. So honestly, yeah, TTRPGs are a great thing to introduce to people, especially if there's a kid that hates math. If you have a kid that hates math, man, my nieces and nephews, it's a really easy way. Get them playing a game, and they will add up numbers, even if they hate doing it. So, if they don't want to do the homework, trick them into doing the homework. You can put the paper next to you and just have them, let's play a game. Oh yeah, okay, so what is this? And then boom, you got the homework done, you gamified it, they don't have to look at the paper. Yeah. Anyways, enough parenting tips. Once I got into DMing, I obviously, like a lot of people do, I went crazy, especially as someone who's been trying to create their own TTRPGs since they were a child. I went hard on the props. I got a bunch of minis, started painting minis, started making props and miniature terrain, and I'll have some of that stuff to show soon. I'm having some of it sent out here, just my like most used stuff and my minis and my flat maps, because I'm not sending my terrain out, unfortunately, but it would take too much space and it's fragile. Sometime after I got into DMing, I wasn't finding any system that really matched what my group was going for, and I wasn't finding anything that I really felt like was emulating the feeling I was trying to nail as a DM. Of course, like a lot of people, I started making systems again. It started with a superhero system that we only played it like once or twice. Then I started making a like Bronze Age fantasy system, and that eventually evolved into the system that I'm making today. It looks nothing like what it started as. Essentially every single thing from the start has been thrown out, and those earliest versions of the game are from about 5 years ago, and it's gone through quite the transformation. So now it's kind of a general fantasy setting currently, but the system has evolved to be a universal role-playing system. So whatever setting you want to attach to it, you can. Anyway, I'm not going to get too in-depth into the system that I'm creating, but the point is I'm probably going to be putting up some devlogs of, you know, my thoughts on certain mechanics and which ones I like or don't like, and, you know, some systems, both D&D and non-D&D, that I enjoy playing. You know, making terrain, painting minis, playing some Magic probably. Maybe just, you know, even just playing some board games or something with my friends. If anything, just expect this to be like a board gaming / tabletop channel, but you know, there could be some video games popping in, like Tabletop Simulator, Baldur's Gate 3, you know, maybe some Darkest Dungeon or something like that, you know. Yeah, if any of that sounds interesting to you, painting minis, making terrain, playing TTRPGs, I tend to do a lot of voices while doing those games, and my players seem to enjoy those a lot. So if you know, you need tips on maybe not even doing good voices, but just doing iconic ones that your players will remember, and like some strategies that I use to remember what they sounded like, because that's another thing, is if you're using a whole repertoire of voices, you don't want to just have to stop and go, oh wait, what does that one sound like? And I've done that a couple times, and it's just better to just make up a new voice, and if someone calls you out on it, then you can course correct, and it'll get a chuckle out of the players. If anything, always just bulldoze ahead as a DM, and if your players remember, then they'll correct you, and if not, then hey, you might correct yourself, or that might just become the character's new voice. If any of that sounds interesting to you, if you want to, you know, do paint-alongs or anything like that, then stick around, give me a subscribe, you know, hit me up in the comments, let me know that, you know, what projects you have going on. I'll make a Discord eventually, or, you know, some of that other stuff, but for now, this is just an intro to the channel. I'll probably also be posting up, you know, just little stories about sessions that we've had, both like horror stories and funny stories that my players have had. And in the cases of the horror stories, I probably won't be mentioning names, just because I don't want to bash anybody. So, and if you have any stories that you want me to tell on your behalf, go ahead and send them to me, and I'll read them out, you know. It's anyways, thanks for watching. Hope you have a good one. See you later. Ooh, some good props. Probably have to cut that.